let's move on to what the rest of the New Testament then has to say about this idea that there's just one time belief and it's once saved, always saved idea is not what the gospel teaches. So when moving on to Paul, the famous Paul in Galatians 5:4, we have Paul saying the same thing. You are severed from Christ. How can you be severed from Christ? You had to be connected to Christ before, but you've been severed from Christ. You who would be justified by the law, you have fallen away from grace. Fallen from where? From grace. How can you fall from grace if you do not have grace to begin with? Who's he talking to? You. You have fallen away from grace. So he's warning them that it's possible to fall away from grace. And to fall away from grace, to drift away, you had to be a part of grace to begin with. And you, the Galatian readers, you, he's not writing to sinners. That's one of the things that we have to understand, that our New Testament is not written necessarily or primarily to unbelievers. It's written to believers. And these statements are made. You, believers, have fallen away. It's possible. Now, again, the famous Romans that everyone quotes. What do we have here in Romans 11? Again, Paul's writing to believers at Rome. But if some of the branches were broken off, and you, although a wild olive shoot, were grafted in among others, and now share in the nourishing root of the olive tree, do not be arrogant toward the branches. If you are, remember, it's not you who support the root, but the root that supports you. So again, that's going to be a key point we're going to come up against here. The idea is not about you and your sin. This is obviously a God thing, and we'll get into that later in the next portions of this topic. Then you will say branches were broken off so that I might be grafted in, as if this is boasting. Remember Paul, and he talks about boasting in his letters, that they could boast that this is all about me. No, it's not. That is true. You were broken off because of their unbelief. Why were they broken off? Because of their unbelief. Because of their sins? No, because of their unbelief. They, the first group, were broken off. They were a part of the vine. They were attached, John 15, and they were broken off. Why? Because of their unbelief. But you stand fast. How? Through faith. So it's faith and belief. So to not become proud. Wait a minute. Don't become proud, but fear. Why is Paul saying in Romans that they who have been saved and stand fast through faith should fear? For if God did not spare the natural branches, neither will he spare you. Oh my. We don't often see these verses in this light. Note then the kindness and the severity of God, both. He puts the kindness that's to lead us to repentance earlier in the book in chapter 2, verse 4. Okay. God's kindness, but also severity. Severity toward those who have fallen. The severity is on the fallen. But God's kindness to you, provided you continue in his kindness. You have to continue. Here's the idea right here in Romans chapter 11, that one must continue in God's kindness. Otherwise, you too will be cut off. Now, they're Gentiles. They believe. They've been grafted in the vine. But if they do not continue to abide, John 15, so there we go. We got another Gospel of John passage that supports what Paul is saying. And so Paul can teach us. Paul can teach us what John and Jesus is teaching. Otherwise, you too will be cut off. And even they, if they do not continue in their unbelief. Oh, here's the continue part again. Remember, anyone who believes, we're going to run into this again. As we continue this journey through these passages and this idea, if they do not continue in their unbelief, will be grafted in. Ooh, if they do not continue in unbelief. So Paul has this dichotomy from the beginning, The Genesis 3:15, the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, the sons of obedience and the sons of disobedience, those who believe and those who don't, those who choose to worship Yahweh and those who don't, children of light, children of darkness. And it's all about what we just said, faith or unbelief. The unbelief, they don't continue in their unbelief. We're going to see this pattern and where Paul gets it. Will be grafted in, for God has the power. We're going to get into this again. It's God's power. God has the power to graft them in again. So God has the power to do it, and God will do it. What is the main thing here? Whether they believe or not. Whether they believe or not. We're not talking about any particular sins other than the sin of unbelief. Okay? God has the power to graft them in. They don't have power. So this idea you cannot lose your salvation, no. I don't believe that anyone can lose their salvation, but you can leave it by stop believing. But one particular sin or another particular sin is not going to cause one to lose their salvation. It's when they stop believing. For God so loved the world that whoever believes, if you're not believing anymore, then you're not grafted in. For if you were cut off from what is by nature a wild olive tree and grafted contrary to nature, and goes on.